we'll continue where we left off at question 5. Question 5 asked you first of all to describe what is meant by an embedded system. Many of you gave good answers. There are 2 marks available. 1 mark for saying that an embedded system has a specific or a dedicated purpose. What we mean by that is that the embedded system that operates your microwave, for example, has got one thing that it does. It controls the cooking programs on your microwave. That's opposed to the general purpose systems that we might use, like a laptop or our smartphones, that we can use for all kinds of different tasks. So 1 mark for saying that an embedded system is a system with a specific or a dedicated function. The 2nd mark comes from saying that it's a computer that is part of a larger system, or part of a larger machine. You should show your awareness that an embedded system is a computer, and that it is embedded in a larger machine. Examples of devices which use embedded systems for part B. There are many, and I can't go through them all. We mentioned a microwave just now. Lots of other household appliances also use embedded systems. Blu-ray players, DVD players, smart TV, dishwasher, washing machine. They would be the obvious ones to mention. Embedded systems are present in cars, and lots of you mentioned that, but it's too vague just to say that cars would use embedded systems. You'd need to give an example. So you could say something like the braking system on a car, or the system that controls the windscreen washers on a car, for example. I would personally just stick to mentioning things around the house. You need sometimes to specify smart. So for example, only a smart TV or a smart thermostat would be examples of embedded systems. A regular old-fashioned TV or a thermostat that doesn't hook up to the internet, they would not be embedded systems. Also be careful, think about whether there's actually a computer inside that device. Somebody answered toaster here, for example, probably getting carried away because of all of the devices that we mentioned in the kitchen, like the dishwasher and the microwave and the washing machine, which are embedded systems. But a toaster is just a mechanical electrical device. You push the lever down, it heats up, it heats the toast, and then it pops back up again. It's not controlled by a computer program. So just be really careful about that. Question 6. 2 of the main differences between RAM and ROM. This was well answered. Apart from some of you only stated 1 difference, and you gave both sides of it, but you were asked for 2 differences. The differences that I would give marks for here: 1 mark for saying that RAM is volatile and ROM is not volatile. The 2nd mark for saying that RAM can be read from and written to, whereas ROM is read-only. Some of you also talked about the different uses of RAM and ROM, and that would be acceptable too. Do be careful, though, to check the wording of the question. Here it just says that the main differences, so I think it's okay to talk about the uses. But if it talks about the properties or the characteristics, then you're not talking about uses there. So you're just thinking about things like, is it volatile, is it read-only, and so on. So if you're in an exam and you had a similar question, just read the question really carefully. This next question was not so well answered. You were asked 3 items that would typically be held in RAM when a computer is running. Some of you said things which were not incorrect, but were not specific enough. So for example, a lot of you said software or programs, and that's correct. But not all of the software and the programs that are on your computer would be held in the RAM when your computer is running. You need to specify that the programs that are currently in use would be held in the RAM. So for me, that's my web browser and Word. They are the programs I've got running. Some of you also attempted to be a bit too specific here. So some of you said things like Spotify or Google Chrome. You should never mention particular brand names in your exam. Here, we weren't even asked to be naming the types of program we would have open. We just need to say that it's the programs we have open. 1 mark. Another mark for saying the files that we have open. Because remember, programs and files are two separate things. What you see here is Microsoft Word, the program, and also Unit 1 Assessment Test SJL, which is a file that is open in Word. So we can distinguish between those two things. Both the program and the file will be held in my RAM at the moment. The third mark is for saying the operating system. I always think it's slightly strange that that counts as a separate mark, because of course the operating system is just a program that is currently in use. But I suppose it's to distinguish between the other programs which we'd have chosen to use and open up, and the operating system which is just kind of sitting there all the time without us making that choice. So the 3 items typically held in RAM: programs that are currently being used, files that are currently being used, and the operating system. Part C was well answered. ROM is used for storing the startup instructions, or you could say the BIOS, for the computer. 1 mark. In question 7, I could tell that a lot of you understand what cache memory is, but you didn't always go into the level of detail that was needed here to get the 3 marks. You need to specify that cache memory is memory that is on or very close to the CPU. 1 mark. Lots of you talked about it being fast, but what you need to specify is that it can be accessed faster than RAM. Because remember, when we're talking about using the cache, the alternative is that we fetch from RAM. Cache stops us having to fetch from RAM because we can store a small number of instructions and pieces of data that we need to access regularly, and we can store it closer to the CPU than RAM. So that's what's really powerful. So you need to mention that cache can be accessed faster than RAM, and that therefore having more cache is going to improve the speed because the instructions are going to be fetched faster, and therefore your overall performance is going to increase. So remember, CPU is on or very close to, cache is on or very close to the CPU, 1 mark, which means that it can be accessed faster than RAM, 1 mark. 1 mark for saying your understanding of what cache is. So cache is used for frequently accessed or recently accessed data and instructions, and therefore it will improve the performance of the computer or the CPU. Question 8. Explain what is meant by virtual memory and why it is needed. Quite well answered by a lot of students. The 3 marks that you need to specify when you are asked to explain what is meant by virtual memory are 1, that it's an area of the hard disk, or you could say an area of secondary storage, 1 mark. That is used as if it were RAM, 1 mark. When RAM is full, 1 mark. Some of you also got a mark for showing your understanding that instructions cannot be fetched from virtual memory, and that if those instructions need to be accessed by the CPU, they first need to be swapped back into RAM before they can be fetched. That was more understanding than you needed here for this question, but if you said it, you could have got the mark. That's why using virtual memory is not as quick as just keeping things in RAM, and that's why it's not an ideal solution. If you found that your computer was regularly using the virtual memory, you'd be better off upgrading to add more RAM to your machine, because the swapping in and out of virtual memory is going to take time. Question 9. Explain why computers need secondary storage. There is a classic misconception here that sometimes students write that computers need secondary storage for when primary storage is full, and that is absolutely not the case. When we talk about primary memory, main memory, we're talking about the RAM and the ROM that can be directly accessed by the CPU. That's what makes it primary. Secondary storage cannot be directly accessed by the CPU. That's what makes it secondary. It's nothing to do with only using it when we've run out of primary memory. Computers need secondary storage because we can't store things in RAM long term. We know that RAM is volatile. We need secondary storage in our computers for long-term or permanent storage. 1 mark. And that storage is for programs and files. 1 mark. So it's that idea of it being long-term, being permanent, that's really key to secondary storage. The final question, 2 devices other than the desktop computer which might use flash memory as their form of memory storage. The rule of thumb that I would give you here when you're asked for machines that might use flash memory or solid state, think about portable devices. Some of you lost marks for giving specific brand names again, like iPad or iPhone. We cannot award marks for that. You need to use the generic terms, such as smartphone or tablet computer. If you used those terms, you would have got the marks. So smartphones, tablet computers, digital cameras, MP3 players, any devices that are going to be carried around, ebook readers, that's the generic term for devices such as a Kindle, they would all be acceptable answers here. When you justify your answer, you need to justify it in terms of that particular device. So you could say, for example, it would be suitable for use in a smartphone because solid state memory is often very compact and it could fit inside the small smartphone. It does say here that your answer should be different in each case. Obviously that's going to be true of a lot of portable devices that you need it to be compact, but you could start off by saying that you would use it in a smartphone because it's compact and it could fit inside the phone. And you could then talk about using it in a camera because you carry a camera around a lot and solid state storage is very robust. It doesn't have any moving parts and it's not going to get damaged when you move the camera around. So make sure if you get those types of questions that you are answering in terms of the actual scenario that you are given. So you could have talked about the fact that solid state storage is robust, that it's compact, that you don't need to store as much data on it, for example. So like on a desktop computer, we might want to store all of our documents, all of our software, all of our pictures, all of our music collection. We need a lot of storage. Solid state, you can't get such high storage capacity for the money. So you might talk about the fact that on a digital camera you're not going to need as much storage space because you're only storing the pictures that you're taking in that short while rather than over your whole lifetime. So that's something that you could mention too. I hope that's been helpful to you in explaining where you did and did not get the marks and some things to bear in mind for your mocks. Good luck.